Well, here to discuss a library collection that's especially meaningful this month during Black History Month is Imani Phillips. She's the historian of the African American History Collection at Jacksonville's main library. Good morning, Imani.
Well, good morning. How's it going today?
Great. Thank you for being here. I want to ask you, there are several databases of African American history at the main library. Can you just kind of run us through what's available?
Oh, lots. The one I've been trying to promote more than any of the others right now has been the Black newspaper collection, as we only have it right now because of the Mellon grant we received last year. So that pulls from several different African American newspapers across the United States. I think between like the late 1800s starting. So some of them are quite old, and it's just freely accessible to library users. So I always
This includes some local papers, some statewide papers in Florida as well.
It does not actually. So interestingly enough, I think the closest one is Atlanta.
Okay.
That they have, but Jacksonville pops up all the time. So we've got a lot of really cool people from Jacksonville. So I always encourage people, I'm like, you may not see Jacksonville on their list, but you will find a lot of Jacksonville there.
And you can do some searching, some database searching by Jacksonville. I was poking around a little bit last night, and you can find stories about race riots. You can find stories about protests. All sorts of things were happening, obviously, in around the First Coast. And so there are a lot of mentions, and like you said, in Atlanta, Detroit, other publications.
Yes. So it's a super valuable resource. And even things that weren't published in our Main Street papers, you'll see in those publications. So I know there was we had a researcher very interested in the Negro League Baseball. And in Florida Times-Union during that time, they weren't reporting it because that is not real baseball to them at the time. But we were able to find stuff on those databases.
That's the Red Caps, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Interestingly, one of the people that, the Red Caps, I guess, were named for the Pullman porters, the train workers that used to wear red caps. That was kind of how they got their name. And the person that unionized them, the first union, black union, was A. Philip Randolph. There's a street named after him here, but he's a big figure in the civil rights movement. And there's actually an FBI file on him there as well, part of this database. Can you talk about the presence of the FBI files and why these civil rights leaders were being surveilled in the first place?
So basically just because they were still, the civil rights movement, a lot of the things happening were technically legal, unfortunately, across the United States.
Technically illegal?
When you are protesting, especially at that time, they considered it un-American activity.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the FBI would be keeping tabs on them because they're like, well, these are people who are disturbing the peace, or even in places where it is technically, legal, it's still, you're disturbing the peace, you're disturbing the status quo. So I haven't gone through like every FBI file ever, but we do have it on microfilm, so you can always just stop by the library and read through. But usually they'd be in chronological order, and truly it would just be like, on this date, so-and-so is doing this, but just slowly just trying to keep tabs on people over time. And some of them are available as well online through the FBI, but not all, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and I think you've noted that a couple of the main figures from Jacksonville, including James Weldon Johnson, who also was surveilled by the FBI, that his file is not available on that national database. It's not online in that sense.
Yes, which I thought was really unusual. But I usually always do a check just in case, because sometimes we get researchers from out of state or somewhere. So I'm like, okay, let me see if I can make your life easier before you drive here to go through microfilm or something.
Talk a little bit about your role as, working in these archives. And I'm thinking particularly in assistance, because going through microfilm can be very time consuming. It can be a little dizzying if nobody's ever done it. It requires sometimes a lesson, just how to operate the machines. What is your role in helping people access some of this information?
Usually just being patient, and just having good customer service really is all it takes. Because usually, for the most part, the microfilm's pretty intuitive once you get used to it. And making sure too, as they research, that they are looking at things like dates and names of specific people, because that is going to save you a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do have some indexes for some of our microfilm collections, but not for all. So having a date can save you hours and hours of searching.
Are you able to do some legwork on the front end or the back end too to help people if they're, some people come in, like you say, from out of town, they're looking for information, and it may or may not be there. Are you able to be a resource for them in that way too?
Yes. So you can always call ahead of time or send us an email, and usually we're able to at least pull some items ahead of time just to save time, or recommend sources or see if we have the sources you need. If not, sometimes we'll just recommend another place that may have them as well. Sometimes I love to think we have everything, but we don't. But, if something, is related to the beaches or something and we don't have it, I'd just be like, you may want to ask the Beaches Museum, or another resource in the city as well, because they may also have something too.
Have you personally found any real treasures that you've, enjoyed finding or been surprised to find in the research that you've done?
Yes. Oh, and a lot of it has actually come more from our researchers than anything I've looked through, which has been amazing to see the amount of knowledge just people in the city have, which is incredibly humbling. Sometimes you'll just get a question and you're like, we had a what? Where? And then you're able to, even as simple as a obituary search, but just like learning about someone's family member you've never heard of, and you're like, oh my gosh, they were in local politics and did all of this. And that's just our city being really amazing. So I think that has been probably one of the most rewarding things about the job, and just being able to learn about neighborhoods I may have not known existed, or or just anything like that. Really, I think is amazing. So
I do think that, A. Philip Randolph is a great example of that. A lot of people know the name because of the street, but not necessarily that he, for instance, organized the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, or that he really led an anti-draft protest, not because they were opposed to the war, but because it was a segregated service. And they said that they didn't want to be participating in a Jim Crow draft, which I think is is a story that doesn't often get told about kind of the nature of his opposition to some of the established institutions.
yes. So it is and there is quite a bit written on him. I wish there was more. I wish there was more written about everybody. So I always, encourage anyone who's researching, and we have had some people where, they are able to present later on about their topic after coming to the library, which is incredible. Or, if we find out they're writing a book, I'm like, let us know when the book comes out. We'd love to add it to the collection if it's about local history, because that's, something we really want to make sure people have access to.
And you point out there's a lot of great historians in Jacksonville, some professionals, some sort of amateur, but incredibly knowledgeable. Do you find that you're sort of seeing the same usual suspects coming in there, or are you seeing new people coming to explore some of the content that just haven't really explored the library before?
A mix of both. So we do have some our regulars that we see pretty often, and then we do have people that just happen to wander up at the library and just end up going on tangents, researching things, and that can be, I've helped someone as, an elementary school student to high school students to, someone who just wants to know what was happening in Jacksonville on my birthday. So the range is quite wide on who you can be helping, which I think is very exciting.
We're talking about the African American history collection at the main library in Jacksonville. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can call us at 904-549-2937 or email us. We've got a call from Nancy in Atlantic Beach. Good morning, Nancy. Go ahead.
Good morning, Sam. Thank you for taking my call. The Most Gorgeous Poetry by Nikki Giovanni. Anyone who wants to do research, go to the library and look up the poem entitled Rosa Parks. She does not come into till the end of the poem. It is all about the Pullman porters and the work that they did undercover to help with Emmett Till and other things that happened, including the organizing that they did in secret. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous poem, and I hope somebody decides to do some research on it and look it up. Nikki Giovanni, The Rosa Parks. It's in the SALT project, if anyone is interested in that too. Thank you very much.
Fascinating. Thank you, Nancy. What
Thank
a
you.
great tip for Black History Month to look up that poem. So I just ask you, Imani, if people want to get involved or if they have something that they think the library might be interested in historically, like what do you urge them, what would you advise them to do?
You can just contact us or stop by. We love taking donations. So a lot of things you do want to make sure that items have we have to make sure it is searchable. So having names written on the back of a photo, having a vague year or range of years helps us a lot. And it helps researchers a lot kind of find what is this, where was this, image taken, what's going on, because that is not something we're always able to find. If I just see a picture, black and white picture of random people, I'm like, I don't know how this is going to help someone.
Right.
But we're always happy to take donations, and usually and even in the memory lab, sometimes we'll see people, digitizing something, and I'll just be like, oh my gosh, that's a picture of the landing full of people. Can we add this to the collection? And, and they'll be like, sure, whatever.
Right. Well, it's excellent advice. Imani Phillips, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Anne.
All right.